Your father is the only man who wants to see you do better than him. He wasn't writing this for publication. He didn't know that these letters were going to be published one day. It's a father writing letters to his son over the course of his life. He was one of the wealthiest people in the world. It's worth taking the time out to hear what he has to say. Even though this person is extremely wealthy, he is still writing letters to his son and he wants him to surpass him one day. And these are the lessons that he's learned throughout his life and he wants to pass that on to his own kid. So let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Raising Humans, the show where we try to better the lives of our children through science and stories. Today, we are doing a solo episode. So I've had quite a few guests on the last 3 weeks, and it's been an amazing experience where I've been able to sit down and learn a bit more about their stories. The most recent episode that we did with Luna, we had a fantastic discussion where we went through the science behind things, and I was able to ask her so many questions that I have had, and I'm hoping that that went a long way to help you guys as well with the questions that you had. And hopefully in the future, we will have even more guests, whether it's science, whether it's stories, as long as it provides value to me, I'm hoping that that will also provide value to you guys as well. So today we're going to go through a book that I've been reading. And the book is this book over here, which I have, which is the 38 Letters from John Rockefeller. And it's a compilation of all his letters that he wrote to his son over the course of 30 years. So it's 38 letters over 30 years. So this is what we're going to be talking about today. And what I've tried to do is go through a little bit of a background of who he was. And then I tried to pick out 3 letters which I felt were the most important to me, and the 3 things that I would take away from this and then try to embed that as a parent and into the lives of my children as well. So let's get started. So who was John Rockefeller? So if you don't know who he was, John Rockefeller was a businessman and he was one of the wealthiest people in history. He co-founded the Standard Oil Company, which became one of the biggest players in the oil industry. He married Laura Spellman and had 5 children, and one of them being John Jr. And these books are all directed and addressed towards him. He had 1 boy and he had 4 girls, and one of them passed away when they were really, really young. So why is this so important to me, and why did I pick this book as opposed to the other books I've been reading? So if you go back to episode 2, I talked about don't take advice from people that you don't want to be like. And with everyone, there's an aspect of their life that you want to aspire to. And with John Rockefeller, it's clearly finance. He was one of the wealthiest people in the world. And therefore, this person has credibility. It's worth taking the time out to hear what he has to say. Another thing that stood out to me with this book was he wasn't writing this for publication. He didn't know that these letters were going to be published one day. He was just writing these letters as they came about to his son over the course of his life. And only later, someone compiled these letters and published them. And therefore, it's worth paying attention to the advice that he gives. So why did I pick this book? The reason why this book stood out to me above the rest was because of the way the book was written and the purpose behind the book. So number 1, it's a father writing letters to his son over the course of his life. He's only wrote 38 letters over the course of 30 years. And remember, this person is one of the wealthiest people in American history. He's a busy guy. So if he's taken the time out to write letters to his kid, it's definitely something he feels that it's very, very important. These letters weren't meant to be publicized. These are private letters that he wrote to his son. He didn't know that one day me and you will be reading them. And therefore, the reason why that's important to me is because he is unfiltered in these books. He's absolutely raw. When he talks to his son about his business partners or the people that he comes across or interacts with, you'll realize that he is not very nice to these guys. If you know his background, you'll know that he was very, very controlled with his emotions. No one really knew what was going on in his head and what he was thinking. And he was always very polite and very patient. When you read through the books, that does not come across because he's completely honest, unfiltered, and he's not shy to say harsh things to the people that he comes across. Another reason why this book really stood out to me is because of the following saying: your father is the only man who wants to see you do better than him. Even though this person is extremely wealthy, he is still writing letters to his son, and he wants him, and he'll say this in the book as well, he wants him to surpass him one day. And these are the lessons that he's learned throughout his life, and he wants to pass that on to his own kid. And this really resonated with me because we have to assume that he felt the exact same way we feel about our own kids. We want them to succeed, we want them to do well, we want them to do better than us. So he makes sure that he is giving genuine, heartfelt advice. So what I've done is I've tried to pick out the 3 letters that stood out to me the most. I'm conscious of your time and I want to try to value the time of my audience as much as possible. So I've just picked out 3 letters which really stood out for me. So let's get started. Letter 1. Your starting point in life doesn't have to dictate where you end up. It's all about the actions you take and the choices you make along the way. And let's not forget the importance of influence and power. Simply having privilege or education isn't enough. We need to harness our knowledge and use it to make a difference in the world. So let's go out there and make things happen because we have the power to create our own destinies. So he starts every letter with a little blurb like this, which summarizes the entire letter that he's writing to his kid. So in this letter, he talks about several things. He makes an analogy of a mountain, and it goes something like this: if your parents live on the peak of the mountain, you are not destined to live at the foot. Similarly, if your parents live at the foot of the mountain, you are not destined to live at the peak. And what he's trying to say is that in most cases, the status of parents will determine the starting point of their child's life. And this really hit me because it boiled down to the fact that what am I doing and why am I doing it? This is why you and I are working really, really hard. This is probably why you're listening to this podcast in the first place, because you want to be better financially, physically, mentally. For the sake of your children, you're trying to be better, and we are doing this so that they have a better starting point in life. We're doing this because you would ideally want your child to have a better starting point than you. So when they live their life, they can get even further than us. And hopefully they will do the same for their own children as well. And this is why we are working unbelievably hard, why we are constantly trying to build businesses and add value to other people's lives to make our own children's lives better, right? So this is, well, for me anyway, this is a huge motivator for me, and it's probably a huge motivator for you too. In this letter, he also touches upon his early life, and he tells a story. At this age, he's about 90 years old when he's saying this story. So this is a story that happened when he was a child in school, when he was a young child in school, but he still recollects this day, even at the age of 90. So you know that this had a profound impact on him. So the story goes like this. He knew that at school they were going to take photographs, and at the time, photographs was a very expensive endeavor. And it's not something you do every day. He talks about how excited he is about his photo being taken. He talks about where he's going to stand, the pose he's going to do, how he'll feel when the photo gets taken. And when the photographer comes to take the class photo, he is then told, can you stay out of the picture? Because the way he looked, he was in tatters. He was a very, very poor child. His clothes were very dirty, and it's understandable that the photographer didn't want someone like that in the picture because it'll spoil the picture. And he remembers that story, and he says that even at that time when that happened, he said he is going to be the richest person in the world. And he says this throughout his life. And people that give live accounts throughout different stages of his life, that he is saying that even as a young boy, or even before he has acquired any sort of wealth. What I take from that is that he had unbelievable self-confidence. Because if you take this book in its entirety, and I've read this twice, the thing he repeats the most is that he has a relentless self-belief. And he says this line, he says, belief comes before ability. So you know that he believed it in his core that he was going to be successful, even at a young age. Even though when he was poor and he had so much struggles when he was going on in life, and he talks about this later on, he believed in his heart that he was going to be successful. And one of the things I want to try to pass down to my kids is that you need to believe in yourself. Because in life, no one's going to believe in you. You need to first and foremost have a powerful relationship with your own self and what you believe in. So we talk about self-talk a lot. What is your relationship with yourself? Is it good? Is it bad? What's your self-talk like? Do you have self-confidence? Do you believe that you can do what you want? Do you have faith that you are an intelligent person, that if you set your mind to something, you'll do it? And more times than not, if you don't keep your promises to yourself, then your self-confidence will be zero. If you say to yourself that you are going to do something, then do it. Because subconsciously, then you're telling yourself that you respect yourself and you do what you are saying you're going to do. The next point in this letter is he wants to avoid the story of a rich child failing in life. And he says in the book, and I'm paraphrasing here, the glory and success of the family cannot guarantee the future of its children and grandchildren. And he mentions PSD. A poor, smart, determined person will come in every family tree. And he will have the skills he needs to bring that family out of poverty. And then he says that it only lasts 3 generations. And in this letter, he quotes a study of 13 very wealthy families in Philadelphia. And he says by the time their child dies, that family is no longer considered wealthy. Once rich children begin taking advantage of their family's success, they will have little opportunity to learn and develop the skills needed for survival. So in this letter, towards the end, he talks about how he hid his wealth from his children. And he quotes in the book, when you and your sisters were very young, I deliberately concealed the fact that I was well off. I wanted to instill many values in you, such as frugality and personal struggle in you, because I know that the quickest way to harm someone is to give them money. It can make people corrupt, arrogant, and cause them to lose their source of happiness. And later on, he says, I cannot bury my beloved children with wealth and foolishly make you all into one that is incompetent and only depends on the success of their parents. So I take away 3 main lessons from this letter. The first is that as a parent, I need to make sure that I am working as hard as possible, as ambitious as possible to give my children the best starting point. The second is that I don't want wealth to be the downfall of my kids. I want them to have the skills that they need to be successful. The second letter is letter 4 in this book, and it's titled Do It Now. So he says the following: opportunity comes from taking action. You can't wait for opportunities to come to you. You have to go out and create them yourself. Don't be afraid to take risks and seize opportunities when they present themselves. Remember, bad habits can be our downfall and determine our success or failure. It's easy to fall into bad habits, but it's much harder to break them. So, strive to develop good habits and maintain them. It's one thing to come up with a great idea, but it's another thing entirely to put that idea into practice and make it a success. Don't just sit at home thinking about all the good ideas you have. Take action and make them a reality. In order to achieve greatness, you need to work hard and keep pushing yourself. Success doesn't come easy, but if you keep working hard and never give up, you'll eventually achieve your goals. Okay, so letter 4 is called Do It Now. And the first part that stood out to me was don't just sit at home and think about all the good ideas you have. Take action and make them a reality. And this reminded me of something that happened a few weeks ago where they had a really good business idea and they wanted to implement it. And I said, why don't you put it in a group and see who's interested or who will use your product, or do some sort of a trial run to see for free to see if it will actually catch on. Because the idea that they had, there was a way to implement it for free, and it wouldn't be as convenient, but it would be effectively, it would be a beta test just to see if it gets some traction. But the pushback I got was that someone's going to steal my idea. And this happens a lot. The reality is, we all know of fantastic ideas, and I am a firm believer that every single person has at least one idea at some point in their life that's going to make them a millionaire. But the problem is 99.9% of people will never pursue that idea, and they will let it pass. They will make an excuse of why they can't pursue it or why it won't work. And then it'll be too late, and it will just be a regret that they have when they get older one day. So TLDR, no one's going to steal your idea. Don't worry. So in this letter, he says a lot of different things. So in this letter, he firstly talks about education. So he gives the following quote: "Education covers many aspects, but it does not teach you anything." And on the face of that quote, you think, hang on, what do you mean education doesn't teach you anything? And what he means here is, if you do not take action, even if you had all the knowledge in the world, it will be as if you know nothing. Because there's no point of having knowledge if you're not going to do anything about it. If you look at the ordinary people, you will find that they are all living passively. They always say much more than they do. Almost all of them are good at finding excuses. They will find various excuses to procrastinate until they finally prove that this matter should not be, or they're unable to do it for some reason, or it's too late to be done. And the next point he makes is that many people make themselves into passive people. They wait until all the conditions are perfect before taking action. And he says that these passive people have mediocre lives precisely because they must wait for everything to be 100% profitable or perfectly safe before taking risks. And he says here is that will never ever happen. You will never be in a position where the opportunity is there, where it's 100% safe and there is no risk at all. And he says, if you wait until all conditions are perfect, you can only wait forever. Remember who's saying this. This is a person that was one of the wealthiest people in the world, and he's saying that there will never be an opportunity where it's going to be 100% safe. There will always be something that's not right. And it reminds me of a quote, so do not wait to strike until the iron is hot, but make it hot by striking. He goes on in this letter and says the real basis people use to judge your ability is not by how much you have in your hand, but by your actions. Towards the end of the letter, he gives a good analogy of habits, and he compares habits to a rope. So he says, habits are like ropes. We spin a rope every day and finally, until the day that it's finally too thick to break. The ropes of habit either lead us to the peak or lead us to the trough. So the habits we make, they're either good or bad. And every day we live, we make that rope thicker and thicker. So he says a fantastic line at the end of this letter. And it goes like this: son, life is a great battle. To win, you need to act again, and act forever. When he says forever, he uses an exclamation mark. And the reason why that's such a big deal is because in the entire book, he only uses these very, very sparingly. So here he's trying to emphasize a point. It goes on to say, in this way, your success can be guaranteed. So what he's basically saying is that just keep acting again and again and again, and you'll guarantee your success. There may be times you fail, but the way you succeed is to continue trying again and again. Now, you'll get three types of people. You'll get one person that will think about an idea so much that they will never actually start. You'll get the second type of person that will think about an idea and eventually will try once, and when it fails, then they won't try again. And then the last type of person that we need to be, and we need to try to make our children be, is the person that is not scared of failure. He fails fast, fails forward, fails often. And this is what I believe, this is what he's trying to say to his son. Just keep trying, because over time, you'll get better and better, and your successes and even in this book, in a different letter, he says you only need to be successful 51% of the time. And this reminds me of something I saw the other day where Roger Federer says that, look at my record, and even though that this person is a renowned tennis player, he says my record is 51%. That's all. And this is the level that I've reached, and I'm renowned, and everyone looks up to him because he's a renowned tennis player. But the point he's making, I'm only successful 51% of the time. And therefore, this is what everyone sees, the 51%. They think it's 100. The reality is, in life, we just need to be successful 51% of the time, and we will succeed. Okay, letter number 3, letter 16. The letter's title, Do Not Make Excuses. So the letter is very short. This blurb is very short, and he says, do not make excuses. Excuses are the source of failure. The more successful a person is, the less he will make excuses. 99% of failures are because people are used to making excuses. And this really resonated with me. Anytime I make excuses, I always scold myself and think, stop doing that. What could you do better to make sure that doesn't happen? And so this is what he says. This is a little bit extreme. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a TLDR here already. But he says here, right at the start, paragraph 1, page 80, he says, in my opinion, and this is John Rockefeller, by the way, in my opinion, excuses are a mental illness, and people with this serious illness are all losers without exception. The more successful a person is, the less excuses he will find. And later in paragraph 2, he says, just pay attention, a little attention, and you will find those who have not done anything or plan to do something. And he quotes here, often they have a basket of straw hats. And what he means by this is they have a bag of excuses of why he couldn't achieve it, why he did not do it or wasn't the right person for it. And he's basically just saying that you will come across people that will have an excuse for everything, and they repeat it so much and they cling on to the fact, to these excuses so much that they internally, in their hearts, they believe this is the case. But you will find that their life is mediocre. This is what he says in this book. They haven't achieved anything. They'll live an average life, and they'll pass this on to their own children as well, because they make excuses for everything. And you will come across people like that. I don't want to be that person. I don't want my children to be that type of person. I want them to take accountability always, even if it's extreme. And I've mentioned this before so many times. And the reason why I'm mentioning it is because it is a big, big issue with children and people today. Everything is someone else's fault. And later in the book, he says that he sees so many people that said, this success is all down to me. The success I've had in life is all down to me. But he also says the opposite is never true. You will never come across a person that will say that the failure that happened to me is all down to me. So you'll get it for one, but you won't get it for the other. What he does later in the letter, he talks about the most common excuses people have. And the first one he says is health. He says health is the first excuse everyone always goes to. I'm not feeling well. I have this issue. I have that issue. My health isn't where it needs to be. It's stopping me from achieving the goals I want to achieve. Health will come as an excuse in many different forms. And in this letter, he talks about a story about a university professor with one arm. And he said, even though he had one arm, this person was the most enthusiastic, positive person that he's ever met. And he gives a quote and he says, my mind, even though I have one arm, my mind is still 100% there. So he just tried to reflect that he had that positivity always. And therefore, whether you have your health, whether you don't have your health, people can still be successful. The second excuse he touches upon is intelligence. And he will say that people will say, I'm not smart enough. This excuse is usually a silent excuse. This is not something that someone will say publicly because they don't want to admit it. It's embarrassing. But they will admit this fear silently deep in their hearts. And he says that this is wrong for two reasons. The first is that he feels that too many people underestimate their own brain power and overestimate the brain power of other people. And he doesn't assign too much importance to intelligence. He doesn't think it's a big deal, and he doesn't, in his books, it's not a big indicator of success or not. He says that an average intelligent person can be way more successful than someone that is highly intelligent, but he gives a condition. The way of thinking that guides us to use our intelligence is far more important than the level of our intelligence. So he gives a comparison that an average talented person who is positive will earn way more money and gain more respect from people than a genius that's negative. So for him, mentality is more important than intelligence. The last excuse people use is luck. When they see others succeed, they think they are too lucky. And he has this analogy, and he has a full letter on luck. So I'm not going to mention it too much here, but I don't believe in good or bad luck. So he believes carefully prepared plans and actions are called luck. He says, look at the people who seem to be lucky, and you will find that it is not luck, but preparation, planning, and positive thinking that brings them to where they are. Towards the end, he gives a summary at the end of the letter and says, excuses keep most people out of the door to success. 99% of failures are because people are used to making excuses. So in the process of pursuing career success, the most important step is to prevent yourself from making excuses. So this is a summary of this book. And if you've not read this book yet, I sincerely hope that this short video has pushed you to try to buy this book. There's 38 letters. I mentioned 3. And each letter there's valuable information in each of them. And I just found it so beneficial. This is probably the only book that I've read twice in one straight away. So I've read it once and I read it again. Probably because it was quite small as well. It's not a long book, but still it was just every piece of advice. There was so much wisdom behind it. And this is not everything I'm saying today. Everything I mentioned in today's session is not new information. It's things that we've already heard so many times before. It's just, in different clothing. Different people are saying it. After a certain period of time, you should be able to find that there's a trend and a theme that these successful people are saying the same thing. This is how I became successful. And you will find that the things that they're saying align. The first letter was about starting points and how we should be working hard to make sure that our children have a better starting point than we did, and how wealth can corrupt people, and why, as a father, he chose to hide his wealth from his kids. The second was doing it now. We all procrastinate. In today's world, it has never, ever been more easy to be successful. Similarly, it has never ever been more easy to become distracted. So the second letter, do it now, is so important today, more important than ever. Stop getting distracted. Do the things that you need to do. Do the thing. And the last letter is about excuses. We live in a world of excuses. Everyone all around us are making excuses all the time, but we want to be different. If you're listening to this podcast, then you know that you want to be better. We want to be different. We don't want to be mediocre. We don't want to be average. We want to try to be better. And most importantly, we want our children to be better as well. And making excuses is one of the things that's going to stop us from getting there. So that's all from me today. And I really hope that this session today encourages you to buy the book and you're able to derive the lessons that I have from it. If you found some value in today's episode, please like and subscribe so you know when the next episodes are coming out. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you guys next week.